Every gardener struggles with two things: expensive rooting powder and cuttings that just rot in water. Stop throwing away your future plants. We are revealing the genius biological hack used by your great-grandparents that turns plain water into a self-sustaining root factory, using nothing but a jar, a few stones, and a secret from the soil: the Alchemist's water jar. Before fast-acting chemical hormones, homesteaders knew how to turn a simple glass jar into a living, oxygen-rich nursery for cuttings. This wasn't just soaking a stem, it was biological water alchemy, a forgotten piece of simple genius that relied on cooperation, not chemicals. Modern gardeners often attempt to root cuttings in plain tap water, only to watch them fail or slowly rot. They miss the essential context. The old way created a complete micro-ecosystem, transforming the water itself into a nutrient delivery engine. This technique, nearly lost to time, was a triumph of self-sufficiency. It required no expensive equipment, only a transparent jar and a little know-how. By introducing specific naturally occurring elements, the gardeners encouraged a trio of beneficial microorganisms to flourish. These tiny life forms worked in shifts, generating the rooting hormones needed to prompt new growth, releasing oxygen so the developing roots wouldn't suffocate, and breaking down nutrients for immediate uptake. It was an ingenious, energy-free solution that bypassed the need for store-bought rooting powder entirely. They ensured that by the time the first calluses formed on the stem, the plant already had everything it needed to aggressively develop new roots. This energy-free genius relies on three specific life forms working in perfect harmony. But if you don't know how to identify them, you're doomed to fail. We'll show you exactly who the three architects are next. The three architects of life. A successful rooting jar is secretly powered by a forgotten trio of invisible life forms that modern gardeners ignore. These algae, bacteria, and cyanobacteria are the true architects, each with a crucial role to play in transforming stagnant water into a living broth. Before refrigerators and commercial labs, the old gardeners intuitively knew that these three cultures needed to be present for successful propagation. Think of them as the three departments of a tiny factory. The first architect is the maintenance department, the nutrient releaser, a collection of bacteria that diligently process the minerals and organic matter in the soil placed at the bottom, converting them into forms the plant roots can instantly absorb. The second architect is the air supply department, the oxygen generator, primarily algae that use photosynthesis to constantly replenish the water with life-giving oxygen, preventing the cuttings from drowning or suffering from a lack of air. Finally, the third architect is the crucial production department, the hormone producer, a type of bacteria or cyanobacteria that excretes natural rooting hormones into the water, directly stimulating the branch to form callus tissue and burst into new roots much faster than it ever would in plain water. It's a beautifully balanced system where each type supports the others, ensuring the plant has everything it needs. But before you can start this factory, you must know precisely where in your garden to find the richest possible starting material. The sweet spot, soil under the shade. The root culture begins not in a clean laboratory, but in the damp, forgotten corners of the garden. The old masters knew that the best soil for this technique was the moist layer shielded beneath decomposing leaves and logs, the very ground that retains the most precious resource. While modern gardening emphasizes aeration and drainage, this method requires the soil that stays perpetually moist, because that is where the three microbial architects thrive. If you peel back a layer of bark or a mulch of straw, you will find the hidden sweet spot, soil that is dark, rich, and retains a noticeable, almost sticky humidity, smelling like the deep woods after a spring rain. This is the biological bank account. This perpetually protected earth is not only full of dormant microbial life, but it also carries the nutrients that the future roots will need. Old gardeners would take a small scoop of this vital, damp material, knowing its darkness signaled its potency. It was common knowledge that if you were growing strawberries under thick leaves or had a heap of old logs rotting down, the soil immediately beneath was ideal. This treasure trove of life becomes the foundation. But introduce the wrong liquid, and you will sterilize everything before you even begin. Rainwater is liquid gold. We rush to the tap, forgetting that municipal water, treated with chlorine, is actively hostile to the tiny life forms we are trying to cultivate. The secret ingredient of the past was water untouched by human hands, pure, natural rainwater, collected easily and freely. For the complex ecosystem in the rooting jar to thrive, the water must be a welcoming host, not a sterilizing barrier. Chlorine, while excellent for killing pathogens in city systems, is fatal to the beneficial algae and bacteria that form two of the three architects. The old way demanded purity. If rainwater wasn't available, they had a simple hawk. Draw the tap water and let it sit uncovered for at least 24 hours. This easy act allows the gaseous chlorine to evaporate entirely into the air, transforming the sterile liquid into usable, non-toxic water. Once dechlorinated, this liquid gold could begin feeding the microorganisms in the soil layer, kickstarting the hormone and oxygen production. Why would you buy expensive purified water when nature gives you the only pure water you need? Now, let's look at the crucial first layer you must create for the system to function: the thin foundation of earth. The base of the rooting jar isn't empty. It's a carefully laid foundation. Old gardeners knew a thin, precise layer of collected soil was essential, just enough to provide the microbial engine's initial fuel without clouding the water and blocking the light. This measured application separates true propagation genius from a muddy mess. The principle was to create a submerged, miniature seed bed. Too much soil, and the jar turns opaque, suffocating the oxygen-generating algae and blocking the light needed for photosynthesis. Too little, and the nutrient-releasing bacteria don't have enough matter to work with. They found the perfect measure was approximately 1 centimeter, a narrow strip of dark earth that could be clearly defined at the bottom. This thin layer wasn't just a physical base. It was the long-term nutrient reservoir, keeping the soil in place and slowly releasing minerals over weeks, ensuring the plant would be well fed once the roots emerged. But this loose soil base needs protection to keep it from floating, leading to the next simple yet crucial addition, which provides 10 times the living space for your architects: the unused stone's silent duty. A few river or garden stones were always added to the jar, not just for ballast, but for a higher purpose. They provided the lockdown structure and maximum surface area where the invisible architects could build their colonies. These common stones, usually overlooked, become silent partners in propagation. Their most immediate task was purely functional. They acted as natural weights, gently pressing the single centimeter layer of precious soil into the jar's bottom, preventing it from floating up and clouding the water. But their true value was biological. The stones provided a massive increase in surface area. Compare the smooth bottom of the jar to the rugged, convoluted surface area of a few small stones. The stone offers 10 times the biological housing where the three microbial architects, the algae, the bacteria, and the cyanobacteria, could firmly anchor themselves and multiply their colonies. They essentially maximize the factory floor space for hormone and oxygen production. The choice of stone mattered little. Any local, unpolished material would suffice, turning simple gravel into living habitat. Once the ecosystem structure was complete, the gardener's attention turned to the cutting itself, beginning with the only cut that truly mattered: the 45-degree promise. Before rooting powders, the only magic required was a patient, precise cut. The diagonal angle wasn't for looks. It was a simple trick that unlocked maximum water absorption and encouraged hormones to rise through the stem, preparing the plant for its new life. This was the first surgical step, essential to the cutting's survival. A straight, flat cut presents a small surface area, slowing down the vital exchange of water and nutrients. The old gardeners understood that cutting the stem at a sharp, 45-degree angle dramatically increased the available surface for uptake. This larger exposed wound instantly drew in the microbe-enriched water, pulling the naturally generated hormones and dissolved oxygen deep into the plant's vascular system. This precise technique not only hydrated the cutting faster, but also signaled the plant to begin the complex cellular process of forming a callus, the protective layer from which new roots would emerge. It was a commitment to the cutting's success, a promise made with the knife. However, preparing the base of the stem was only half the battle. Without the next protective cut, the plant will drink itself to death before the roots even show. The sacrifice of the leaf. When rooting a large leaf plant like hydrangea, you are fighting against its own thirst. Grandmothers knew the young plant could not sustain its leaves without roots, so they made a surgical cut to prevent it from desiccating itself, a patient act of sacrificing part of the whole to save the life of the cutting. A large, healthy leaf is constantly losing water vapor through a process called transpiration, pulling moisture up and out. For a freshly cut stem without a root system, this process quickly drains its internal water reserves, leading to wilting and failure long before any roots can form. The old gardeners would carefully remove all the lower leaves that would be submerged in the water. But for massive upper leaves, they performed an unusual operation. They cut the remaining leaves in half. This simple, effective reduction immediately lowered the surface area, radically cutting down on water loss and compensating for the lack of roots. This measured, protective sacrifice gave the stem the essential time needed to focus its energy on hormone production and healing. Without this careful management of the plant's moisture loss, even the most perfect diagonal cut would be wasted, because the true secret to the root explosion is keeping a hidden portion of the stem completely submerged. The submerged secret of the stem. The deepest roots don't just appear at the 45-degree cut, they emerge higher up, where the bark meets the oxygen-rich, submerged micro-ecosystem. The old rule was simple: keep the healthy stem fully underwater to maximize hydration and access to the circulating hormones. This approach defied modern notions that only the very tip of the cutting should be wet. The reality is that the bark of the stem is a hidden factory, capable of generating new roots anywhere it is exposed to the right conditions. By fully submerging a long section of the stem, the gardener created a generous zone of opportunity. The microbe-enriched water, constantly infused with oxygen and rooting hormones by the three architects, activated the dormant cellular structure along the entire length. This is why when old cuttings were pulled, the roots often appeared in multiple clusters or dark rings along the stem, not just a single. Explosion at the bottom. This method ensured maximum hydration and utilized every potential root node, increasing the chances of success for multiple types of cuttings. This technique allows you to propagate almost anything, including the beautiful flowers you just bought at the grocery store, which is our next secret. The revival of the market bouquet. We discard cut flowers when they fade, but a careful gardener knows that a seemingly spent bouquet of jasmine holds the seeds of new life. Even market stems can be resurrected and turned into endless new plants, a powerful lesson in conservation and resourcefulness. Today we see flowers as fleeting beauty, bought for their scent and color, then tossed when the petals drop. But the old gardeners saw the potential in every stem. When a bouquet of jasmine, roses, or even certain herbs began to wilt, they didn't waste the thick stems. Instead, they would remove the fading flower and any remaining leaves, perform the 45-degree promise, and slip the stem into the prepared alchemist's jar. This was a simple form of perpetual gardening, ensuring that every purchase or gift led to new growth in the backyard. The store-bought cut was often already primed and ready, and the nutrient-rich, oxygenated water gave it the final boost needed to bypass the death sentence of the vase. It proved that you never needed a fully established mother plant to propagate. You just needed the secret of the jar, which works even faster if you find a specific liquid catalyst. The green water catalyst. Sometimes, the rooting process needed a kickstart. If you found water that had naturally accumulated and turned thick and green, you had struck gold, a potent, ready-made microbial infusion that sped up the entire process considerably. This was the gardener's secret weapon, a living, visible catalyst. While most people associate green water with stagnation or decay, the old gardeners saw it as a vibrant sign of active life. Water that had pooled after rain in an unclean trough or collected at the base of a planter and taken on a bright green tint was overflowing with the essential oxygen-generating algae. Instead of waiting for the in-situ soil and stones to build up the microbial population, they would use a spoonful of this green water to instantly inoculate their fresh jars. This instant infusion of active oxygen generators and dormant hormone producers immediately populated the new ecosystem, bypassing the slow, initial colonization phase. It was a clever, free way to leverage nature's abundance. You were essentially borrowing a living, functioning community to accelerate your own growth. This system works on the easiest cuttings, but can it tame the most stubborn plants in your garden? We'll see next. The stubborn cuttings, tamed. Certain garden favorites, from rosemary to bougainvillea, are notoriously stubborn to propagate. This simple biological system was the reliable method the old growers used to bring them back to life, taming the finicky nature of plants that resisted easy rooting. While some stems like willow or coleus root if you simply look at them, others, particularly woody herbs and flowering shrubs, require far more patience and a perfect environment. The old gardeners knew that without the constant supply of oxygen and the immediate availability of rooting hormones, these resistant plants would sit dormant until they eventually rotted. The microbial ecosystem solved this problem by providing a perfectly tailored liquid environment. Plants like lavender, rosemary, and oregano, which are often prone to fungal issues in damp soil, thrived in the clean oxygenated water. This method allowed the plant to heal and focus entirely on root production without the stress of competing with the soil environment. It transformed these difficult luxury plants into common, reproducible backyard staples, provided you can keep the environment secure from one hidden, annoying enemy that still loves water. The sentinel against the swarm. Still water is essential for the ecosystem, but it invites an unwanted guest, the mosquito. The old solution was ingenious and non-toxic. A simple physical barrier placed over the top to protect the fragile young ecosystem from the buzzing swarm. Mosquitoes are drawn to stagnant water as a breeding ground, and their larvae can quickly compromise a rooting jar, introducing unwanted pathogens and clouding the water. The old gardeners had no need for chemical sprays or costly treatments. They simply utilized a fine, porous synthetic fiber, often remnants of fabric or a fine mesh, and placed it carefully around the stems at the jar's opening. This sentinel barrier acted like a tiny screen door. It was fine enough to physically block the mosquitoes from laying their eggs in the water, yet open enough to allow air and light to pass through unimpeded, which was vital for the oxygen-generating algae below. It was an elegant, effective solution that respected the biology of the system while protecting it from pests. Once the jar was protected and the bright white roots were fully formed, the most delicate and life-changing ritual of all awaited: the careful transfer to earth. When the bright white roots finally appear, the last delicate step is moving the baby plant from its liquid paradise to the rough stability of soil. This transfer from water to earth is a patient, careful ritual that determines the plant's ultimate survival. The roots that form in water are white and fragile, having adapted to a perfectly balanced, nutrient-rich liquid environment. Moving them to dense, dry soil is a shocking transition that demands the gardener's full attention. The first step was to select a small pot and carefully half-fill it with light soil. Then, using gentle pressure, or sometimes a simple fork, the rooted cutting was lifted from the jar, often with some of the stones still attached to the root mass. It was crucial to spread the roots out carefully in the pot, covering them completely with soil so they wouldn't dry out. Immediately after planting, the process demanded a thorough, deep watering. This essential final drenching settled the soil instantly around the white, fragile roots, eliminating the fatal air pockets that kill aquatic-formed roots and ensuring the successful conclusion of the propagation effort. But the story of the Alchemist jar didn't end here. The legacy of the renewable jar, a true, self-sustaining system, is never wasted. After the new plants are moved, the remaining nutrient-rich water is not poured away, but renewed to start the cycle again, feeding the garden indefinitely. This closed loop was the final, elegant lesson in gardening self-sufficiency. Once the rooted cuttings, perhaps a vigorous hibiscus or a thriving jasmine, were transplanted, the water remaining in the glass jar still held immense value. It was cloudy, rich, and actively populated by the three microbial architects. The old gardeners would simply top off the jar with fresh rainwater, instantly refreshing the ecosystem for a new batch of cuttings. This highly efficient practice meant they never had to rebuild the foundation from scratch, maintaining a constant supply of hormone-rich, oxygenated liquid. Some old jars remained in continuous use for months or even years, proving the method's long-term sustainability. The sight of a tiny cutting flowering, while still in the jar, was the ultimate testament to this powerful aquatic ecosystem. The Alchemist water jar wasn't a one-time trick. It was a renewable legacy of growth, a forgotten tradition worth bringing back to every backyard. If you want more lost wisdom and self-sufficiency secrets delivered right to you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. Thanks for watching and happy gardening.